Another round of applause for Honorable Kimani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and my colleague, the Right Honorable Speaker, our CS, our Leader of Majority Party, our Clerk of National Assembly and Leadership, and fellow members, good morning. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you again to Nakuru County. This is the beginning of Nakuru County, led by our very own experienced member for Naivasha, the Honorable Jane Kihara. From there you go to Gilgil, led by the great lady, the Honorable Martha Wangari. Na sisi tunafunga kule mwisho, Molo, then Kuresoi North, then Kuresoi South, then Kuresoi North. So allow me to take you through my presentation, and I hope yes. So I'm going to take you through the next 10 or 15 minutes to discuss two things. The most important one is the matter before the House, the session paper number 2 of 2025, which is the partial divestiture of Safaricom Limited. But before then, I will take a few minutes to lay the foundation of why this is very, very important. This fifth session, honorable members, represents to us a very key and very prime time where we'll make a very critical decision. The last time we had any privatization was during the Safaricom IPO. Now this is going to give us a chance to either approve, reject, or amend the session number 2 of 2025 that's where we are of taking some of our shares from Safaricom Limited to some of our shares at Safaricom Limited from Government of Kenya to Vodacom. The quality, therefore, of this oversight that we're going to exercise will define this fifth session. Next slide. Where have we come from? Privatization has not started now. It started through the post-independence period between 1963 through 1970s, and the state adopted an active role in the economy. And this was guided by what was called the session paper number 10 of 1965 on African socialism. The objective of it was to accelerate national development, correct regional imbalances, promote indigenous entrepreneurship, and attract investment where the private sector lacked capacity. By the late 1970s and 80s, there were many structural changes in these particular institutions, and that is why, through now the 1992, we now adopted the formal privatization policy. And this is subsequently, again, what came through our Vision 2030 that now says that now where the state realized that they cannot efficiently handle some of these commercially viable institutions, and therefore that's where now privatization started through now 1992 to 2002. There has been what was called the economic recovery strategy for wealth and employment creation. And I think this will be very well remembered as one of the key projects of President Moi Kibaki, and then administered by the very able minister, the FCP Amos Kimunya, where now privatization began. And this began through the first ever successful IPO, which was a Safaricom initial public offering in 2008. I don't know where many of you were in 2008, but I know there are some of them, like the Honorable Speaker, who are still members of this House at that particular time. And then in 2007, we had the Kenya Reinsurance Corporation that again went through an IPO where the government shareholding was 100%. So we took 40%, remaining with 40%. Then there was a strategic sale of Telcom in 2007. Then came Kengen, then the IPO for Mumias Sugar Company Limited, where we did the second offer in 2006, and where we have took around 18% of our shareholding. Why is privatization necessary? You know, we are saying there is a lot of inefficiencies and wastes in state-owned enterprises. There is very poor performance and mismanagement. There is continued reliance on government intervention. There is need to protect public finances. We need to improve enterprise performance and efficiency. We need to reduce government intervention and need to attract capital, private capital and forced intervention. And we also need to promote competition and support long-term economic transformation. So there is enough study that shows privatization is extremely necessary today. I want you to take your time to go through this slide, and a PS really explained this, but I want you to explain it in slightly a different way. Our baskets for our ordinary revenue is 3,321,700,000,000. That is the entire money we collect in the country. Out of this, 1.097 trillion goes to not loan, interest on loan. 1.097 trillion shillings. 205 billion shillings goes to payment of pensions and CFS. Then we have our wage bill of 960 billion shillings. Our civil service pension takes 34.4 billion shillings. Our county transfers takes around 415 billion shillings, and our contingency fund takes 2 billion shillings. How much then does it remain for development? Madam members, only 29.8 billion shillings is left. So out of all the money we collect 1.1 trillion interest expenses, 205 pensions, 960 billion wage bill, 334 civil service pension, 415 goes to counties, contingency fund 2 billion. So we are only left with 29.8 billion shillings only for development. What can this do? It's hardly enough for NGCDF alone, or NGAF alone. So therefore, we must find ways of how else do we raise revenue, how else do we raise money for development expenditure. And that is why now the next slide, the next discussion now comes to why this is important. As the PS said, last year, towards the tail end of last year, this Honorable House passed a very important bill, the State-Owned Enterprises Act. The Government-Owned Enterprise Act. But how does this operate? So whichever way you look at it, these state-owned enterprises, what we call state agencies, they are owned, those are funds, company A, company B, or company C. It goes now to that. They are either funded through A&A.
Members, lower your conversations. The conversations are rising above the presentation.
They are either funded through what's called appropriations in aid. This is what you pay for the services that you get from these government enterprises, or they are funded through government or donor-backed loans, which are called guarantees. Overall, they are still funded through taxpayers' money. So whichever way you look at it, they are still funded by taxpayers' money. Next. I want you to pay attention to this particular slide. There is something apart from public. And I just told you 9.6 billion on Kenya Ways, and that money from Kenya Ports Authority. Next. This comes now the critical discussion about privatization. And here we disagree with National Treasury on many things, this being one of them. In 2023, the cabinet approved 11 SOEs to be privatized. Then there were targeted 18 other SOEs that were targeted for sale. By February 2024, Cabinet approved the sale of 7 more SOEs. Now, here is a challenge. You are telling a whole institution that they're going to be privatized, and you told them they will be privatized in 2023. 3 years later, you have not made a decision. And of course, there are some of the intricacies around there, for example, the court case that was there in court. But however, you are putting these institutions in limbo without them knowing, are they government institutions? Are they going to be privatized or not? And therefore, it is very important this Honorable House, together with the National Treasury, makes a decision of these entities. So if we say we are privatizing institution X, there must be timelines in which they must be privatized. Otherwise, you have employees in that institution, you have suppliers, you have management who are living limbo without knowing what their future, is. And some of these institutions, for example, there's so many of them. I don't want to go through them now, but we have like Mount Kenya Lodge Limited, Cabernet Hotel Limited, and we must ask ourselves, what business does government need to own Cabernet Hotel Limited? Why do we need to own Mombasa Beach Hotel? What business does government of Kenya need to own Ngulia Safari Lodge? What business does Kenya need to own Sunset Hotel in Kisumu? It does not make any sense. And doesn't even make sense that we say that we are going to offset these institutions 4 years ago, and 4 years later, they are still government-owned enterprises. They are still leaking money, getting money from Exchequer to just operationalize them or to operate them. This Honorable House, led by my committee and the Committee of Privatization, passed a very useful legislation, the Privatization Act of 2005, which was enacted in October. This replaced, and this is very important, I've seen most of the discussions around the media, for example, citing the Privatization Act of 2023. So the enactment of Privatization Act of 2025 repealed the Privatization Act of 2023, and therefore the act that is being operational now for privatization is the Privatization Act of 2025. And this particular act now has several changes that we made. For example, establishing the Privatization Authority under National Treasury, it directs that all proceeds must go to development. It introduces transparent participatory process with budget parliamentary oversight, and it uses steps and eliminates formalities to step up privatization. Next. In the current act, it is specifically clear that for any privatization program to happen, there must be absolute authority and express authorization of National Assembly. And this has to be taken into consideration. Again, the Privatization Act of 2023 had said, interestingly, that if Parliament did not approve a privatization program within 90 days, it would have been deemed to have passed. Again, now, we are saying that we can either agree or reject such particular proposals. Most importantly, we also change the board composition of both these enterprises. Next. We have now the role of National Assembly in this. Next. I want to take you through now why we are here today, and I know this is where most people are really have been waiting for. The Safaricom partial divestiture. I've had discussions of people saying that government of Kenya is selling Safaricom. There cannot be any more lie or any more mis and disinformation like that. Kenya does not own Safaricom. Kenya only holds a stake of Safaricom. We only hold, out of 10 billion shares, Kenya owns 6 billion shares only. And therefore, Kenya is not selling Safaricom Limited. We are only offsetting a bit of our shares, reducing our stake. In December 4th of December 2025, the leader of majority party tabled the session member number 2 of 2025 for fact investiture. The buyer is Vodacom Group. They want to acquire a stake of 15% out of that 5% shareholding, and I think that also needs to go on record. Government of Kenya now, we're getting to the value. Government of Kenya owns 35% of the shares at Safaricom. So what we are doing, or what the proposal is to sell the 15% shareholding to reduce our shareholding from 35% to 20% to Vodacom Limited. The shares being sold at 6,9,814,200 shillings at Kenya shillings 34 shillings per share. The transaction value for that sale is 204 billion shillings. And upfront, and I explain this later in other slides, we're receiving 40.2 billion shillings in terms of future dividends. So the total value of this particular transaction would be 244 billion 500 million shillings. That shows, those two pie charts shows what is going to be the change of this in terms of share ownership. As we speak, Kenyans own 25%. Government of Kenya owns 35%. Vodacom owns 40%. If this honorable house approves this particular partial divestiture, the shareholding will change now to the next pie chart there, where Kenyans will still own 25%, Government of Kenya will own 20%, and Vodacom will own 55%. So we are not offsetting our whole stake. We're just offsetting only 15% of our shares at Safaricom Limited. What does this mean? And again, I'm going to go to the next slide about, someone asked about the price. When you talk about shares of a listed company, share prices are determined by several methods, and I explain that in the next few slides. But one of the most powerful tools of valuation of shares is the market. And that is what the market shows us. When Safaricom IPO was done in 2008, the share price was given at 5 shillings per share. What happened immediately after was a dip from 5 shillings per share to 3.6 shillings per share. And you can see how that price has moved up to where that is data as at yesterday, close of business yesterday. We closed yesterday as Safaricom shares trading at 29.55 shillings. This means that all the players in the market, all the investors, everyone is asking, what is the value of this share? And now those factors of demand and supply determine what the share price is. And as at yesterday, the share price of Safaricom Limited was traded as 29.55 shillings. The highest we've ever had has been 36.25 shillings. I have heard people saying that Safaricom shares were trading at 50 shillings. Then I'm wondering which world they live in. This shows analysis from 2008. This has been the share prices of Safaricom. From when we had the IPO at 5 shillings, the highest, the lowest we had was 2.95 shillings around 2011. The highest we've had is at 6.25 shillings. And as yesterday, the price per share was 29.55 shillings. And these are facts. The problem with facts, they get to be stubborn. Very stubborn. And never lie. Next. Let's go to the critical question about, and I want you to pay, honorable members, please give me attention on this. How do you value shares apart from doing it through the market? There are 4 economic models that are used in valuation of shares globally. The first method was developed by someone called Myron J. Gordon and Eli Shapiro. Martha Wangari, Gordon is not just the Gordon, you know. There is Gordon, a very serious economist. They developed a model called the Gordon growth model, what's called the constant growth model. And this says, why would you want to buy shares? You want to buy shares so that you can earn dividends. So you use now that dividend to calculate then what is the value of that share. The second method, what you call, we use free cash flow to equity. When the company operates and removes all the operational money How much is left in that company for profitability? That's called free cash flow to equity model. It was developed by someone called, another called Copeland, Kohler, and Murin. Then you have residual income model. And you have lastly the price earnings multiple model that was developed by Graham and Dodd. Let me now take you through each of these models. So next slide. So when you're calculating the share price, the market price. When you're yes. Okay. You might ignore everything else. But how to calculate the share price using the Gordon growth model? V0 is the value per share, which is a summation of N, the dividend expected 1 plus the expected rate of return to power T, which is time. So if you take all this, and this dividend growth rate is what I calculated for the last 10 years, gives us the intrinsic value for Safaricom at 27.98 shillings per share. This is method number 1. I will not take you through all that mathematics. Go to the method number 2. If you use market multiple principle, what is called the price earnings per share, and you insert that into that is price per share times expected price per share, then you get the value of 36.627 shillings per share. That is our value number 2. We had 4 methods. So let's go to the third method. The third method, we use free cash flow to equity model. And again, I have explained the maths there. Let me not take you through the maths. If you insert all the figures, again there, it gives us the value per share for Safaricom at 25.28 shillings per share. That is formula number 3. Lastly, formula number 4, what we call residual income model. And again, this we take the return on equity, then we divide the required rate of return. No, we minus the required rate of return, and we multiply by the book value. Yeah. So once you use again this price, this particular formula, and it's attested there, you get the value per share at 24.55 shillings per share. Next. So those are the 4 models. So the 4 models, if you go quickly back, gave us the first value. Gave us the first value at 27.98. The second value is 36.62. And the third value is 25.28 shillings. And the fourth value is 24.55. These are economically, globally valued tools of valuation per share. So the highest is that the one that we've seen at 36. Again, 36.62 is the highest value using the market multiples comparison, that is price by PE, and then the lowest is 24.55 shillings per share. Those are globally accepted models of valuation of shares. So if anyone else tells you that the market share of Safaricom is at 80 shillings, or at 90, or whatever price it is, ask them which valuation model they are using. And if they can prove to us which method they use, then you can say that this share has been either undervalued or overvalued, or whatever value they are going to create. Secondly, when you talk about this value per share, I was speaking to someone over the weekend and saying me, if it is true that the market value of Safaricom is say 50 shillings per share, and yesterday it was traded at 29.55 shillings per share, then there are more than 10 billion shares owned by private citizens in the market, which are trading freely at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. So if you placed an order tomorrow, and you say, I want to buy 10 billion shares at 50 shillings, you will get all those shares, because those people will be willing to offload those shares to you. And anybody from Kenya, from anywhere across the globe, can willingly trade in our shares at Nairobi Securities Exchange. And that, again, is a stubborn fact. Next. What are some of the comparison valuation mechanism that have been used. Standard Investment Bank, an independent bank, in May 2005 did valuation using discounted cash flows based on 5-year estimates for the GSA business and a mix of EV and EBITDA, that is earnings before interest and tax, and market capitalization to revenue for the financial services, and they valued that shares at that 6.38. Feeder Investment Bank, again in May 2005, valued those shares at 24.8 shillings. NCBA Bank valued Safaricom shares at 27.63. And Kipra valued them at 27, using the value added, when using market share price in January, and 36, using market price share in March 2021. This is before the decree. This is before the investment in Ethiopia. Again, these are valuation from independent institutions using their own models. Next. So we're saying, what are some of the key assumptions that have been made on this Safaricom thing? That we're saying that there will not be any major operation of financial shocks. The dividend policy will remain unchanged. There's going to be modest nominal growth. There will be proportional dividend distribution. That Kenya shareholding would be reduced to 20%. No extra dividends. Stable macroeconomic and regulatory framework, and figures presented in nominal shillings without discounting. Lastly, there is another concept again. So what Vodacom again is offering government of Kenya, if we take these shares from you, you are assured of receiving dividends every year. And you will receive dividends, say, for the next 6 years. So in lieu of the dividends that you're supposed to receive, they are saying, we will pay you that money in advance, upfront. What does that mean? Go to the next. So it means that if we take all the money that we're supposed to receive in the next six years, assuming the same dividend payout ratio, we would have received 66 billion shillings in the next 6 years. Next. But how much are we receiving now? And I want to take this time to address that question. So we would have received 66 billion shillings in the next 6 years. How much are we receiving now in lieu of that dividend? 40 billion shillings. That is the offer on the table. What does that mean? Are we taking a loss? Are we taking a profit? For that, you need to ask yourself, if you were to take a loan of 40 billion shillings now, because we're not receiving that 40 billion shillings now, we receive it in the next 6 years, what will be the present value of that money now? And to take the present value, you use 1 plus expected rate of return, then you multiply the number of years. No, the 55 divided by 1 plus R is the growth rate multiplied by 2 power 6, that is the number of years. It would mean that the value of that money that you're supposed to receive in future now is 29.3 billion shillings. That is the difference between present value and future value. 40 billion shillings in 6 years is worth 29 billion shillings now, because of what we call discounting for present value and future value. To put in other ways, we're saying, if you received cash today, you will receive 40 billion. In 6 years, that dividend will have received 55 billion shillings. With a funding cost of around 5.6% per annum, and if you take the market sovereign yield at 11.3 million shillings, it means the present value of that 55 is 29. So actually, we are taking a gain by receiving that money now and not in future, using this simple calculation. Next. Next. I think we're done with that. So I hope that we have gone through this mathematics of what does it mean now to receive the dividend in the future, and what does it mean if you receive that money in 6 years. Number 2, I hope I've been able to take you through the calculations and you have understood what that valuation per share would actually mean. However, what are the gray areas on this particular transaction? And this is what I want to conclude with. The communication from a speaker was very, very critical. When this paper was tabled, when the second paper was tabled on 5th of December at the House, the Speaker made a communication, and I want to pay attention to this communication, and said the counting of days that are required for Parliament to make a decision will start on 10th of February. What does the PFM Act say about that very important date? The PFM Act says when a sessional paper for divestiture of shares is tabled into Parliament, it must be considered in the House within 28 sitting days. And what does it mean if Parliament does not approve or reject or make a decision on that? It means that that sessional paper would have deemed to be approved. Therefore, members, if you make whichever decision you make, you must make it within 28 sitting days. And what does sitting days mean? If Parliament sits on a Tuesday morning and Tuesday afternoon, those are how many days? And therefore, calculating these days, if you go straight on, we have up to, Cynthia, we have up to, go straight on, we calculate these days. We had up to, I think, some date in March. Where is it? We have up to 26th of March to make a decision. We have 3 decisions to make. We can approve the session paper as it is, without amendments. We can reject the session paper as it is, or we can amend that session paper. So those are the 3 decisions that we must make. And you must make that decision before 26th of March. And if you do not make that decision by the 26th of March, then that decision would have deemed to be approved by Parliament. Again, what are some of we started, yes, in terms of processes also, we started stakeholder engagements for the last 2 weeks. We post for this week to attend this particular discussion. Then next week on Tuesday, and I will be sharing that with honorable members because it's very important, we are doing public participation and civic education in 30 counties. So I'll share those counties with you and the dates and the venues so that at least please members help us mobilize yourself and members of the committee to come and attend those public participation hearings. But what are the gray areas here? The sessional paper says that this money will be spent on critical and viable infrastructure projects. But here is a challenge. As it is now, if this Honorable House approves this partial divestiture and that transaction is complete, where will that payment be made to? The money will be deposited into the consolidated fund services account. When money goes to CFS account, has no discretion of, it doesn't matter what the PS wants to pay. There is order, first charge, second charge, third charge. So, and I heard the PS talk about infrastructure fund, but is there a legal framework for that fund yet? And I know the PS is here, he will respond to that particular question. So our concern so far, and the concerns of the members of the public is, if this money is deposited to the consolidated fund services account, there is no legal framework or legal guarantee that that money will go to be spent on key infrastructure projects. And therefore, it's very important that as we make a decision on this, we are guaranteed, or we make the framework to guarantee that that money will go to the infrastructure projects that the government is talking about. It is not enough to talk about that's going to go into infrastructure. It is important to have a clear legal framework that guarantees. And I think we could be back to where we were in 2024 with the housing levy. Remember when you passed the Finance Act of 2023 and created a housing levy? What was telling in court was said, we have created a housing levy for affordable housing. But what guarantees that that levy will go towards paying for affordable housing? So we had to come back later in the year and do the Affordable Housing Act that now created the Affordable Housing Fund that now guarantees your housing levy, you are sure that inatoka kwa payslip, inaenda kwa fund that goes to build those particular projects. So Treasury is here to demonstrate to us that this money actually has a legal framework that guarantees that it will go towards creating that infrastructure fund that they're talking about, and that has to be through a legal framework, not just by saying. Number 2, a question is asked, which law should have been followed in terms of privatization? And people are saying we should follow the Privatization Act. Unfortunately, the Provision Act exclusively excludes partial divestiture of government shares from following the Privatization Act. So the Provision Act cannot be used in partial divestiture. However, the exclusion of following the Provision Act in terms of privatization does not exclude this particular transaction from other laws. And what does other laws say about disposal of public assets? There is the PFM Act, which is very critical. And the PFM Act, again, remember, is even anchored in our Constitution. And what does the PFM Act say? That for any divestiture or sale of government shares to private, there must be absolute approval of National Assembly. Not Parliament, National Assembly. And that is why this decision is before this House. So in terms of procedure, in terms of legal procedure about this particular partial divestiture, it was not a boardroom conversation. What you have now is a proposal by executive asking Parliament to approve for this particular partial divestiture. And that is exclusively and well provided for under the PFM Act. So in terms of following legal procedure, there has not been any breakage of any law because no decision has been made. If this Honorable House, for example, decides that they are not going to approve this particular partial divestiture to Vodacom, the transaction will be dead. There cannot be any sale of these shares if there is no absolute approval of the National Assembly. So when people say that no, there was a boardroom conversation, all conversation must start from somewhere. Once it starts from somewhere, it goes to cabinet. Once cabinet approves, they bring to National Assembly. And until National Assembly approves, that is when the transaction will be complete. So if the Honorable House rejects this particular transaction on the floor, then that transaction will be dead. So honorable members, I've tried the best I can to be as objective and to be as I can on this particular matter. But that is a decision we have. So we have identified for us, the Joint Committee, our biggest gray area is how do we guarantee that this money will go towards funding infrastructure and critical projects as provided for in the session paper. Without any further legal framework, without regulations, and without creating that infrastructure fund framework as per the law, then that money will go to consolidated fund services and it could go to pay anything, including debt, interest, or paying of salaries. But in terms of procedure, we are so far satisfied that the procedure was followed, the valuation has been given, and now the decision lies solely in the, to this House. I don't know whether we have that for the counties, for the... Yes, so this is where we are going to be in the next 2 weeks. We are doing public participation in 30 counties. So we are starting on next week on Tuesday at KSC Nairobi at 10 a.m. Then you go to Mandera, Machakos, Nyandarua, Nakuru, Wajia, Kitui, Nyeri, Kericho, Kirinyaga, Baringo, Kisumu, Embu, Murang'a, Kakamega, West Pokot, Tharaka Nithi, Kiambu, Vihiga, Uasin Gishu, Nandi, Meru, Kisii, Taita Taveta, Kajiado, Samburu, Homa Bay, Mombasa, Kilifi, and Kwale. So please check, and we circulate this in our forum. Please check when you are coming to your county, where we are going for the venue, and please mobilize your people to come and give their views, because their views are very important. Our Constitution says there cannot be such a decision that can be made without public participation. I thank you, honorable members.
Another round of applause for Honorable Kimani. Yes. Honorable Kimani Kuria, you tried to carry members apart from one slide where you lost them in the summations and the intrinsic value, but they are back. Mr. Speaker, if you allow us, we can go to the plenary before.
Yes, we can go to
Because Honorable Shuria's presentation was to be done together with Honorable Kimani. Yes. So honorable members,
do plenary
for Dr. Chris,
1 hour.
for 1 hour. We have a lot of time, honorable members. Let me start with the first three, this side, first three here, and first three here. I will start with the Honorable Faith. I'll go to Honorable Karoli, and I will go to Honorable Basil. On this end, I will start with Honorable Bishop Kosgei, Honorable Sunkuli, and Honorable Kamene. On this end, Honorable Amudende, Honorable Shinali, and Honorable Salasia, in that order. Get the microphones. We will do another round. Be patient. We'll do another round. We start with Honorable Faith. Honorable members, let us keep the conversations as low as possible so that we hear the questions.
Thank you very much. And thank you for those two presentations from our PS and our very own KK. Mine goes to Bwana PS Chris Kipto about pending bills. I know you mentioned, but you didn't conclude on this issue. The status of pending bills is a great concern to Kenyans. Verified bills remain unpaid to date for many years. Please tell Kenyans when you intend to pay the verified ones, because they've been pending for even more than 5 years. Businesses are suffering. Businesses are cash trapped. Please save Kenyans from this very difficult situation and assure them when you are going to pay pending bills. Thank you very much.
Next is Honorable Karoli.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Let me begin by inquiring from both the Chair and the PS whether the constitutional principles under Article 10 and Article 232 on management of public resources were complied with. In particular, whether there is an independent market survey study selecting which method of divestiture would yield the best returns for the public. Because here we have a block sale to an existing shareholder, but that is not the only divestiture method. We could have offered that to competition, we could have gone to further public flotation. The first thing that we would like to see as a house